Earlier today, I saw an online discussion where somebody asked, what is the strongest kill team? Now, this is something I've covered quite a bit on the podcast, but I figured I'd make this dedicated video because let's face it, YouTube is a search engine and many new players might not listen to a 3-hour podcast about Kill Team just to get what can be answered in a more concise video. So if you're new to Kill Team and you want to jump headfirst into competitive, like it seemed like the original post was asking for help to do, I recommend one of what I call the Firing Squad 4 or the main 4 factions of the Shooty Horde archetype. These are Tau, Imperial Guard, Admech, or Eldar. These factions are a sort of family that has a similar playstyle or feel on the tabletop, even if the models look different or the guns have different names. Of course, they aren't exact duplicates of each other, there are some big differences. But they win the same way, tend to fight in a similar way, have very similar goals, and are often beaten or countered the same way, and so forth. Like I said, they're kind of a family that I call an archetype. We'll cover these factions individually in more detail in this episode, but first I want to cover just a couple things about these as a group here at the start and why I would say to pick one of these for a tournament team. Reason number one is that Kill Team has had a few different formats already in its short lifetime. In competitive play, the thing that you need to do to score points and win has had different iterations. Some tournaments have only required positional play, much like chess, where killing did not matter at all. And some, like the current format taking off, has required killing to score points as well as positional play. The secondary objectives available have also changed over time, and each packet has had different choices available to you. However, in each of these formats, the Shooty Horde teams have done very well and been able to navigate any changes that were different from the last time you put them on the board. And this leads to point number 2. This family of teams have repeatedly won tournaments. They've done it from the very first large tournament at the Nova Open, where Elliot Miller won with Plasma Spam Imperial Guard. And speaking of which, I have 2 episodes of the Killzone podcast chatting with Elliot. If you want to listen to him talk about his guard, I'll flash a link on the screen now to one of those episodes we did. It doesn't require you to join a Patreon to listen. In addition, this family of teams won last year's Nova, where the Tau took top spot. But that's not all. The family has also won Nova, the next one, LVO, BAO, and the SoCal Open tournaments with Eldar. And Admech just took second place at LVO just over a month ago. Now, I've said that Admech were a sleeper top-tier team for over a year, and some people laughed, but now after LVO, people are realizing I was right. The team was only 1 point away from winning the largest tournament the U.S. has ever had. Again, I have interviews with multiple winners and players that run these factions on the Killzone podcast. In fact, I just published an Admech interview with the 2019 number 2 ranked ITC Kill Team player in the world, talking about his Mechanicus yesterday. It's available on Patreon as we speak. So, these factions have faced different win conditions and formats, and not only do they do okay, they tend to win, regardless of whether the tournament is running arena, open board, positional scoring, mixed hold, and, hold and kill victory points, all that kind of stuff. Doesn't matter. They do this because if you look at the need to hold being required to score points, all of these can easily take a good number of bodies because they're relatively cheap. 7 to 13 points gets you some very strong models with these teams. And at the 100 or 125 point level that we're typically playing in the tournaments, that point format, this means you can easily field 10 or more models and achieve that board control. But these models aren't just cheap, they tend to have effective output. Admech can take up to 6 models with plasma calibers for only 13 points each. They can have 2 models hitting on 2+ in a turn. They have free faction buffs called Canticles that do things like reroll 1s with their entire team to shoot. So if the plasma hits, it wounds on anything but a 1. Most teams don't get to roll a save versus plasma. Then, since it's a 2 damage weapon, they roll 2d6, 2 dice, looking for a 4, a 5, or a 6 on either one of those to take you out of action, rather than just the 1 dice that many other weapons get. That's just one example of the type of nasty, scary shooting that these kinds of teams can bring in addition to multiple bodies. There's radium carbines that can proc 3 damage, there's Tau rail rifles, there's Eldar fusion or plasma grenades or star cannons, there's Imperial Guard spamming waves of plasma and flamer weapons that automatically hit with up to 6 shots each, no need to roll to hit. These are the kinds of things that this family's troops can carry, and they're the things that kind of put fear into even hardened tourney grinders. But that's not all. These are ranged weapons. That's the important thing I keep going on and on about when I talk about these factions. They can kill you while they stand on an objective and score points. So, now that we've kind of looked at an overview, which of these is right for you? Let's take a look at what makes the individual members of this family unique. Of course, you could just pick what you think looks coolest, what's cheapest for you to kind of get started collecting, or what would be fastest to paint. Everybody's got different priorities in the game, and if you're coming in just for competitive, hey, you could have success with any of these in kill team tournaments, so just kind of go with the one that feels right to you. But there are still a few things that make each shine in a different way. So what I want to do right now is kind of compare. Just a kind of a quick overview to help you make a more informed decision, or maybe kind of see if there's something that stands out to you that maybe fits your play style a little better, something like that. So first we have the Eldar. The Eldar tend to have weaker ranged weapons than any of the others that I'm talking about today. They're slightly less killy at range overall than some of the other factions, but they have that great toolbox that more than compensates. And with that said, I don't want you to think they're not killy, they are very killy. Just rewatch my stream game from LVO this year where the Eldar player Janice Gillum managed to kill every Tyranid I had on the board. Now, one of the ways that Eldar shines is by being unpredictable to play against, or just limiting what the other player can do. Those are two kind of themes that are strong in the Eldar, and they kind of show up in different ways through all of these teams. But for example, with the Eldar, they can use a tactic called Fire and Fade to shoot you and then run, say behind cover, before you can shoot them back. So let's say they've killed one of your guys, then they just vanish. You can't shoot them back. They can also use this to grab an objective long after the movement phase has ended. This is the more common way that the tactic is used in competition. So example, you're standing on an objective, they shoot you off of that objective, and then they run their guy onto it. So there was an objective you were holding at the start of the shooting phase, but it's ones that they're getting points for at the end. So they're kind of tricky. And while that's going on, they also have decent melee units and things like that. And again, the theme is limiting what the opponents can do. The Howling Banshee, for example, has a rule that lets them charge, but you don't get to shoot, overwatch, or retreat. You don't get to react. And they have the ability to re-roll that charge. So a guy standing around 9 inches away has a great chance of actually charging you, even if it looked like you were safe and you would have been safe in a normal charge situation. And Eldar also have great weapons like that heavy weapons platform, pelting you with decent shooting. But that's not all, because the unpredictability goes even further. They have one of the best deep strike strategies in the game right now, letting them drop in with outrageous strength 10 weapons. They're good, strong stuff, the fusions and things like that, the wraiths. They can come right next to where you thought you were safe. Now, I won't harp on about this faction for too long, but hopefully this illustrates the fact that this is an unpredictable one to play against, and they have access to great tactics, letting them make decisive swings when they need it. The next team to talk about is Tau. They also have some unpredictability with the Recon Sweep ability acting in a similar role to that Eldar Fire and Fade move. They can run a Pathfinder onto an objective in the shooting phase, or close a door in arena in the shooting phase to deny you shooting, or if they want to shoot, they can kind of run a guy over and open a door that you were hiding behind with that ability. Their main scary weapon is the Rail Rifle, which they can take 3 Pathfinders equipped with. These are strength 6, so they wound most things in the game on a 2 or a 3 up. And they can buff this further with a Demo Specialism that also now drops a mortal wound in addition to the other damage on a 5 up rather than a 6 up to wound now. And the AP4 means that many things in the game won't get an armor save, and the D3 damage means they can have 3 dice to roll on a single injury roll, looking for a 4, 5, or 6 on any one of those to kill you. So 3 chances to kill you with 3 dice. They need that 4, 5, and 6. It's pretty strong. The Comm Specialist and Recon Drone mixed with CP Tactics can easily have 2 of the 3 rails hitting on anything but a 1, and the Sniper Specialist re-rolls 1s, making them just brutal for pretty much anything that they can see. If they can see you, you're going to get deleted probably. And once again, they're putting out this great offense while they are scoring points, sitting on an objective. Besides the amazing rail rifles, the star of most tournament lists are the drones, usually the gun drones or shield drone. These protect your guns, because if an enemy shoots at a valuable Pathfinder with a rail rifle, the Tau player can instead just put all of that damage off onto a drone, and the drone just takes a single mortal wound. Even if you were shooting a crazy strong weapon with strength 10 and d6 damage, it's just 1 mortal wound. You don't take that damage on your gun that you want to protect, you say, hey, this drone takes it. Now this works in melee or shooting, so no matter what, it's very hard to remove those big scary Tau guns. The shield drone is single-handedly disgusting for this role because they ignore the mortal wound on a 5 up. So oftentimes, you might just do no damage at all to anything, even if you put your best weapon onto a Tau. Now when you're sitting up across from them, you can choose to shoot those shield drones first to try clearing them out, but the shieldies had that 4 up invuln, meaning they ignore 50% of whatever you shoot them with or hit them with, before they also now get that other chance to just ignore the damage on that 5 up. And even if you get through that, you still need that 4-up on the injury roll to actually kill the drone. Otherwise, they survive, and you have to do all that again next turn. So drones are a big part of this faction, and it's something that might put you off a little bit if you were expecting to run like the Fire Warriors and things like that. This team tends to have a lot of the little robots and a few really strong guns and some synergies going on together. One of the things that makes the drones so strong is that they have the fly keyword, letting them move 8 inches over models and terrain as if they were not there, as well as that rare ability to fall back and still shoot. This gives them unparalleled positional strength, since that's an advance that's a statistical 11.5-inch move, and they can basically just teleport through anything with that fly keyword. They can go on top of terrain, around terrain, through a packed arena corridor. They can get wherever they need to go. And this is especially nasty on gun drones with the Sasea subfaction, basically. They have 4 shots via 2 weapons on the gun drones at strength 5, rerolling ones with that subfaction to hit. So let's say you're playing against Tau. You go first at initiative. You say, oh no, there's big guns, and you hide from big guns. Now you're locked into your move. It's their turn to move, and these guys just fly over everything and get you in their sights. So the Tau are really good at counterplay, and it's something that's really fun about them if you're getting into that team. The Tau's weakness is the fact that they don't have any melee, unlike the other shooty hordes. Most shooty hordes that I'm talking about have some melee. In fact, a lot of them will have amazing melee, even if it's only concentrated on 1 or 2 models. But they compensate for this with the For the Greater Good special rule, letting an entire team fire Overwatch, even if you only charged 1 of their models, in some cases. The Tau Sept means any Overwatch shots hit on a 5 or a 6, not just a 6. And they even have a tactic letting them Overwatch successfully on a 4-up. So Tau are not fun to charge, since it means, hey, here's this amazing shooting team. They now gain the equivalent of a second shooting phase when you do that. There are ways to have the Tau to where they're shooting better on Overwatch against chargers than they are in the normal shooting phase. So a very strong team in this family of strong teams. Moving on to the Imperial Guard, as the next team in this family of monster factions, the Astra Militarum hold the line and kill team by easily claiming the ability to bear the largest number of plasma guns in the game. They are a very aggressive team and can take 8 special weapons, allowing them to drop 16 strength 8 shots in a single shooting phase that wounds on anything but a 1. Their high AP of -3 means many things don't get a save, and at 2 damage per shot, that's a potential 32 points of damage that this team can dish out in a single turn. Although that's statistically unlikely, since there's a lot of potential dice in the way of that, still, that's a frightening prospect when you're, say, running an elite team against them like Space Marines. They might only have 6 or 7 models, and you're able to do potentially 32 points of damage, 16 shots per turn, and any one of those is instant death if it gets them. In that case, you would have more plasma than the other guy has models on the board. And when a single shot means death, having that 16 shots on 8 plasmas is just frightening to set up across from. Just note that the attempt by GW to balance plasma is a special rule where hit rolls of 1 on overcharged plasma kill the bearer after all of its shots have been resolved. The narrative here is that the weapon overheated and exploded, killing the bearer. So either way, with this many plasmas on the board, things are going to die. Now, of course, you don't have to overcharge and risk killing your own model. You can fire a standard shot without that risk at 1 less strength and 1 less damage. And to be honest, strength 7, AP -3, 1 damage is still a very good stat line. And you can just make one of your plasmas a sniper specialist to reroll 1s and bank a command point for a reroll as well. That way you would have some semblance of safety when overcharging, since the 16% odds of exploding are only shots taken with calculated risk that you can mitigate when you need to. But there's other ways to get around this, because much like the other teams mentioned, Imperial Guard has some shenanigans to help them even further. Orders are a unique component that this team can leverage to make the most of their team and get just a little bit more out of them when and where you need it most. The Take Aim order allows another model to re-roll 1s in the shooting phase, which means another plasma gunner is safer when choosing to fire his weapon supercharged. So you would have your sniper spec, and you would have the one that is a plasma that has been affected by the Take Aim order, basically. So that's 2 weapons supercharged pretty safely. For 2 CP, you can use the cunning strategy tactic to issue another order if you wanted to, meaning you can give this buff to another plasma, which would mean in all that's 3 potential models, rerolling those scary ones to hit if you're supercharging. These are the Sniper Specialist and the 2 other plasmas that you've given the take aim orders to. But the Guard don't just have plasma. Versus melee hordes and things that want to charge in at you, you could take just as many flamers instead on these weak bodies that are, they're just taking a lot of bodies, but they're cheap and they don't have a good save and things like that. You'd have D6 shots each that automatically hit, no need to roll. Another of those special orders to consider here is Bring It Down, because for no CP, here's a buff you can give, which is an ability to reroll wound rolls of 1 for the selected guardsman. Now, you can stack that on something like a Demolition Specialist here, since that would mean, in all, you would have D6 auto-hitting shots, wounding at strength 4 before the +1 to wound versus obscured targets, or you could have up to +2 to wound if you use the Demospecs custom ammo tactic in addition for 1 CP. And then, with the order, you'd be rerolling 1s to wound. Wounding even Space Marines on 2 and rerolling 1s on that wound roll for only 1 CP is very strong. And this kind of stack can help you mow through things like squishy orcs or Tyranids, whether you need to remove big bugs or small. So you've got an answer in the Guard for everything. If you're going against a lot of bodies, you're usually going to want to take more flamers. If you're going against really tough things, Space Marines, all that, you take the plasma guns. And once again, this team has some movement shenanigans many other teams don't have. They take a page from the Eldar playbook, being able to advance and shoot without penalty, thanks to one of their orders. They can advance instead of shooting, letting them move in the shooting phase like Tau or Eldar with another. They can attack with melee in the shooting phase with fixed bayonets. I'm not aware of any other team that has that ability, and it's got some very interesting potential uses. So overall, the Guard have some great shenanigans in addition to brute strength of their ranged weapons. And things just keep getting better because now, with recent additions to the rules, models like Gottfried and Pious Vorn add even more to their toolbox and shouldn't be ignored. And lastly, today we cover the Admech. I just interviewed the #1 ranked ITC Admech player for the Killzone podcast and posted that episode to Patreon yesterday. So if you can afford the $5 a month, I suggest you give it a listen. Of course, they don't charge until the first of the month, so you could technically game the system, go over and listen, and then cancel before billing starts in the first of the month if you really need the info. You're stuck at home right now with the coronavirus concerns. You don't have $5. Hey, I understand. To put it simply, though, Admech has elements of many of the other factions discussed today, along with some very cool elements that make them stand apart. The Canticle mechanic is the most important to them, as this lets you give an army-wide buff to the full team before each round begins. For an example of why this is so strong, remember that downside to the plasma we talked about with the Imperial Guard? Remember how I had to lay out a strategy to reroll 1s with 3 of them to negate the supercharge risk? Admech can take 6 plasma calibers and reroll 1s with all of them, not just 3. Yes, that's right. Guard have 8 plasmas max and reroll with 3 for 2 CP. Admech can have 6 and reroll with all of them for free, no CP. Then they can spend some of that CP to do it again in a later turn if they want, or to buff that ballistic skill on a couple guys. Admech can take up to 2 omnispecs in a list to ignore obscured penalties. It's kind of unique to them in this family of teams. This is important because this affects the penalty to hit and the penalty to their injury rolls. Or if you want to affect your accuracy, an enhanced data tether and some CP with a comm specialist can put multiple pluses to hit buffs around in the army. In fact, the sheer amount of buffs, debuffs, and synergies of this team is staggering. They have surprisingly brutal combos for shooting or melee that you wouldn't see coming a lot of times unless you know it's there. Because, look at the Vanguard Alpha with Taser Goad. Just this tiny little guy that you see on the table. You don't think anything of him. He doesn't look like a melee monster. But see if you can keep this straight. Because you look at his stat line, the Vanguard Alpha has 2 attacks base at strength 3. That's not amazing. But let's say you make him a Zealot Specialist. Okay, he gets +1 strength, +1 attack on a turn he charges. So now he's strength 4, 3 attacks. But the Taser Goad melee weapon is strength +2, so he's now strength 6, 3 attacks, and each hit roll of 6 up counts as 3 hits. So if you rolled 3 6s to hit with that 3 attacks, it would actually count as 9 hits. However, if you have a data tether nearby and you pay 2 CP, he gets +2 to hit. So his 3 attacks now hit on 2 or better, and any 4 or higher is the 3 hits at strength 6. But we're still not done because his rad saturation rule reduces enemy toughness by 1, meaning a toughness 4 opponent is now toughness 3 if they're in combat with you. And since the Alpha is strength 6 with the Taser Goad and the Zealot buffs, you're hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s, with 4s to hit. Any 4 to hit on that attack, counting as 3 attacks each that have hit. And you have 3 attacks to do that with. Now imagine all of this going off after your plasma line gets charged by a mini blob of orcs. You run this guy in, proc all those buffs, and just drop up to 9 hits wounding on 2s. This is just scratching the surface, guys. This isn't even necessarily something you might run. This is just what is available. And there are so many models available to the Admech. They have such a wide variety to them that all of these are going to interact with these buffs in different ways. And this is in addition to their plasma guns, rerolling 1s to hit, while also +1 to hit, and so on. Now, all of this has been just the most basic introduction to these teams. If you're starting competitive kill team, I say you can't go wrong with any of these 4. However, what I should say here before I let you go is these are not auto win buttons. There's a lot of intricacies and oftentimes procedures that you'll come to learn over time that is part of what brings these guys success. But overall, this family of teams, this archetype of similarly situated factions, are what I would say constitutes the strongest teams out of the gate. And they are teams you can grow with in your journey through this game. But what do you think? Do you agree? Do you see something different or something I missed? Do you think another team is stronger? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As always, if this video helped, why not give it a like and subscribe? And that's it for today. This has been Beeranid 40K. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today and sharing your hobby with me. I wish all of you the best in your kill team journey.